So I'm just beginning to start stitching my little signatures together. I've already stitched these ones. I'm just using a bookbinding technique. So I've got a bit of perlé thread, decent thread, so it's quite strong. I've already stitched these two together, so I just thought I'd talk you through attaching the next one. Depends on how big your book is as to how many times you're going to end up stitching this, but you basically start in the middle of your page and bring your thread through. You're then going to go back, so I've come out of the middle one here and I'm going to go into the middle of my next page. Just open it up. Oops. Let's find the middle. There we go. So I'm going through the middle. Then I'm going to go just a little way along. So I'm going halfway between the middle and my edge. So depending on how big your book is, will depend on where you're going to go. So you come back out through there. And then this is going to go back into the middle. So I'm joining it to the next double page down. So just open, find my double bit, there we go. Okay, so I'm coming back in here, so it's going to go up there, and I've already got some of the stitching from the first pages that I've put, so I'm going to go back through the same hole, so that's there. It comes back out that side. Okay, and then I'm going to attach it, so you're sort of weaving in and out. So I'll just get the middle, so that comes back through there, and then I'm going to go back down the hole. So I've got my stitch there, this hole here, where my needle's going to go back down, and then I go back in the middle section. So I'm going from one signature back to the next one, so just find that little hole. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm coming back up through the hole there. Oops. You can do it double if you want. I'm just doing it single because I don't want it to have a massive bulky bit in the middle there. Okay, so I've come back up. I've got my middle hole here. It's going to go back down. And that's going to come, just make sure it comes back through that one rather than going back through the other. So if you come out of one section, you're then joining it back into the next one. Threads just decided they're going to start knotting up. Come on, work with me, not against me. There we go. So now moving back down, so I'm going to go halfway between there and the edge, take my needle just out through that signature, so it's just coming out of that one. I'm going to join it back into the next one. It's going back in there through that hole, out through the bottom. Just make sure you're coming through that one double, you don't end up going through the other one. Keep it fairly taut but not too tight. Page is straight, that's it. Then I'm going to go back through the bottom, and then you just make your way back up, so back through that hole, back in through the middle, back out. And what you should find there is when you come back to this middle bit here, there we go, you should find now is when you go to your pages, you've got 4 little stitches, because I've split it into quarters. So if I go on to my next one, I'll end up with 8 there because obviously I've got 2 signatures either side. And then on to my last one. Should have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, that's right. So I know that I've got them all stitched together. So then all I need to do is just do a little knot. Just to finish that off. And that's going to be my pages ready. There we go. So we've got all my pages all stitched together, ready to start working on our little pieces. Okay, so if you've been following the 12 pages of Christmas on my Instagram, I've done page number 1, which was 3 little circles of fabric popped onto a backing fabric. So this hasn't been stitched into the book yet, it's done on a separate piece. And then I've just played around with blanket stitch and French knots, some little bullion, see, so you can play around with any type of stitch whatsoever. And then I've just pinned that onto the page. To stitch it down, I'm just going to use some tiny little tacking stitches, really little ones. Now it's totally up to you. You could make this quite decorative, so you could do a blanket stitch all around the edge. It could just be a running stitch, it could be an invisible stitch. It's totally up to you as to how you attach it, but you just need to bear in mind with this little booklet you will see the back. Now if you end up doing loads of bits on the back, there's obviously you've got the option of even cutting out little bits of fabric, popping some bonder web on the back and bonding a piece of fabric, or you could even do extra bits. It's totally up to you, but I'm just going to do the 12 pages on the front. So the first ones was the circles with stitching. The second one I'm doing, I've just got a little piece of yellow fabric that's got a line that's run through it, and I've used that line as a guide, and I've started doing lots and lots of tiny French knots, tiny ones. So just a quick reminder of doing a French knot. It's basically coming up from the back of your fabric, lay your needle along the thread. Now because these are tiny, I'm only going to wrap it round twice. And then you go back down where you came up. You've got your little knot there at the bottom. And this will start creating, they're like tiny little seeds. So it's just 2 wraps round and then go down. With this one, I've used a number 12 purlay. And then I'm just using here a fine cotton thread. So they're quite thin threads to give that tiny little knots. So there's going to be lots of scattering of knots all the way over. Then what I'm going to do is some straight stitches up the top and then just some little grid shapes. So I'll keep updating this on Instagram. And then once I'm ready, I've got page 3 planned. So I'll show you that one once I've done that one, got that a little bit further on. This is just quite nice to do, just sat on an evening. It's just a little bit of work. But like I say, if you keep looking on Instagram, here on YouTube I'll do an update of a number of pages all in one go. But because I'm doing this on an evening sat downstairs, it's just a little bit easier just for me to keep taking little photos of what I'm doing as I go along, really. Ended up getting a knot in my knot. There we go. Put that through. Sometimes when that happens, it's because this little tail on the end starts fraying. So if you find that happens, just trim it off. And then you can carry on stitching. For some reason, it just, I think because it frays on the edge, it just keeps catching. The other thing you've got to be careful of, obviously, is your threads twisting. So if you start getting it so it's got in loops like that, it's just really just to twist your needle, just undo them a little bit, and then they'll stop looping around on themselves. So have a look on my Instagram. There'll be a bit of an update of how this developed and moved along, and then I'll be back with number 3. Okay, so we've got our first 3 pages of Christmas done, so I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a show of what I've done. I've actually got these attached now into my book. So our first little page was the 3 circles and then playing around with stitch, and I have stitched these, I have stitched them in. I don't know if you can see the tiny little dots just around the edge, but I have stitched them into the book. So if you just have a look on the back, there's just a little bit of a running stitch, and I don't mind that little bit of running stitch behind. I've just done it in a neutral thread, even though I can still see the tiny little dots on the front. I don't mind that. I just prefer that than having a dark thread going around the edge. So our first page of Christmas, sorry, that one done. Our second page of Christmas was play with French knots. So there's a lovely line gathering of French knots that are going around there. Then played around with running stitch, just some different lines to create a grid. I also did one by doing a circle. I tend to do that by just getting little tins and just popping it on and drawing a line, and then you can run around that as well. And then just some little groups of 3s just going in different directions, just playing around with that. So that's just one piece of fabric. And then our third page of Christmas is the little weaving. So I've got here, I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4x4 bits of fabric, just woven, and then I did a little running stitch in a pale thread just all the way around the edge, just so it held it together, and then picked out a colour that was on one of my bits of fabric, and then just played around a little bit of lace over the top, 3 little buttons. We've got some bullion stitch, pistol, French knots, a bit of fly stitch, some sort of like a cross between a French knot and a pistol stitch, and some straight stitch just running around. So those are our first 3 pages. I've been really impressed with what I've seen so far, and we'll be moving on to the next one shortly.